and Sean is going to teach us a little bit about some Tableau. So take it away, Sean.
So hi, thank you for spending some of your Friday evening in a university classroom with me and Roman too. My presentation's on Tableau. That's something that I use a lot. If you follow me on Twitter, you've seen some of the things that I do with Tableau. My idea tonight is not so much to sell you on Tableau because you're already choosing to spend your time here on a Friday night, so I assume you're interested. The idea will be to get into some data that was sent out in the email and have you produce your first viz. So hopefully this is hands-on and lots of opportunity. If you've never done this before, if you've messed around with it and never actually published something, that's what we're going to try to get you this evening so that you can go and do this on your own and flood people's timelines with charts the way I love to. So we'll start. So just for a really quick introduction, I'm Sean Tierney, and it's at Charting Hockey. I launched a website this year. I work for the Bulldogs in the OHL and do some writing at The Athletic, so really have myself spread thin all over the place, trying to do lots of things this year. And in the future, and I'll say this again at the end, if something comes up and you're interested in pursuing this, and you're trying to make viz of your own and you're struggling, you can always reach out to me on Twitter. I try to be as accessible as I can there and to help people through and guide you along. So it's kind of like the beginning of a relationship rather than the end this evening. Okay, so there won't be much in the way of slides, just something to get us into Tableau. We'll spend most of our time in Tableau, actually moving some things around. So I'm presuming that you've downloaded Tableau onto your own laptops. Is that the case for the most part, if you're interested in doing this? So Tableau is free to download, which is one of the major appeals. It's drag and drop based, which is really handy if you're not a super talented coder, or if it's not something you want to spend a lot of time learning. This program's fantastic because it doesn't really ask you to be a coder to start producing pretty nice viz that can do a lot of different things, kind of just built in. So if you haven't downloaded it, it's a free download. There are very expensive versions that you can purchase that have features that you won't need if sort of social media space is what you're looking to do, or articles or whatever. So I'll get you to open up Tableau right now if you have it. And so you'll get a very uninviting screen that looks like this with a lot of things going on. And so the only other piece that I asked in advance was that you download some data from Natural Stat Trick. I chose that in part because we're in Ottawa and Natural Stat Trick is based here, and so supporting the local data makers. The other reason is that Natural Stat Trick provides the data for free right now, as well in a download format, which is easy to use. And so it's a great place to get started if you're looking for data for yourself. So there's a lot of different pieces going on here, and I'll just sort of explain how to use them, what they mean, which ones you don't really need to care about as we go. But the most important part to get started is connect to data, which you can do right here with this link. So I'll ask you to go there. You get a few options from the drop-down. The two that are the most common, at least in my experience, are Excel and text file. And so for Excel, you're talking about the XLS file where you have multiple tabs in a book. And so that's the one you're looking for there, and it asks you to choose the tab that you actually want to work with. If you're just using the CSV, that's the text file, and that's what we're using this evening, so I'll click there. And then you should have something that looks like this.
Excuse me, I don't, can I get it someplace?
Sure, so if you go to naturalstattrick.com right now, is anybody else in that same situation that you don't have data to work with right now? I mean, I can just sidetrack if you'll indulge me.
Yeah, for sure.
Really quickly here.
I'm not trying to distract you.
So, naturalstattrick.com. And for us this evening, we're using team data, so you click on Teams.
Okay.
And then we'll get a file like this. So the one I'm using this evening is the one that was in the email, so we'll all see the same thing, even though it's 2 days out of date, so we won't have last night's games. But you'll have a different version, so you'll see something else. So right down here you have CSV all.
Yeah,
Just click there, and that'll download it for you.
thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, it's coming.
Great. All right, so let's hop back in. So when you load up a data file, Tableau gives you one chance to see if you've messed anything up, which happens, especially if you're using the workbook style, the Excel. And so you just get a data preview right here that you can, you've uploaded the file that you actually meant to. There's a number of things you can do in this main screen that we're not going to cover this evening. One of the really useful ones is that you can join files here. And so if you're using date of birth, draft kind of data, and then you're linking it to current stats, you could have two files that line up in some way that share some column to link them. They can be linked here, and you would just drag in a couple of different data sources and link them. We're not doing that this evening. It can be a little bit strange, but it does work, and you get this preview to see if you've done it correctly or messed up. So once you have this, just click on sheet 1. Now we get the data is loaded on the left pane. And so there's two things going on. The first is dimensions, and the second is measures. Those are both going on the left side pane. So dimensions are usually strings, and so they're text. And we can tell that. Tableau lets us know by putting the font, the alphabet symbol beside. And so we know we're working with a string, so it's not something you can put on a scatter plot per se. And then you have measures. Those are all the ones that are numbers. If for some reason, and it does come up, I don't think we'll touch on it this evening, but you can click on the little icon right beside any of the data and you can change it. So if for some reason changing the Corsi4 percentage, changing that into text, into a string is something you needed to do, it does come up. You can change them here and it just forces it to happen. But we won't do that this evening, we'll just leave it as such. We all good so far?
Yep.
Lovely. Okay, so let's do the very basic first. Tableau is beautiful because it's drag and drop. And so you can know nothing and you can still create things just by accident. And several years ago, that's basically how this happened for me. So I'm just going to create a shot rates chart, which is kind of just the basic thing we look at, how many shots you're generating for, how many you're allowing against. So we can see that in the measures on the side. There's plenty just with that one download that we could have selected, but let's do shot rates. So I chose Corsi4 per 60 and threw it on the columns, and I'll choose Corsi against per 60 and throw it on my rows. Okay, so again, Tableau is beautiful because it gives you options and options and options. It's really built for beginner into data, which is why I recommend it to anybody who's getting started, because it just gives you a lot of guidance. It filters you through to making things. So one way it does that is you can click on the Show Me on the right, and just, if you haven't clicked on that yet, take a look. When you throw a couple of measures up into your columns and your rows, it gives you suggestions on what kind of graph might make sense based on what you put in. So if you're not sure what it is you're even trying to make, Tableau will suggest to you what makes sense with what you've got. So right now it's choosing scatter plot for me, which is exactly what we want to do. It shows that you could also maybe be choosing horizontal bars, maybe that's what you want. And what else? We have bullet graph. If you're trying to create a specific kind of graph that's here, but it isn't lit up, it tells you at the bottom why it won't do that. So let's say you want to do the most forbidden thing possible, create a pie chart for hockey. Right now it's telling us that we need one or more dimensions, one or two measures. We don't have that, so it won't give us that option. So you can play around in here, and Tableau is handy, it gives you options. But we're good, we know we want a scatter plot, so we're going to leave it like that. So the issue now is Tableau doesn't know how we want to break this down. Right now, it's got the entire league jammed together as one unit. And so we're getting this one sad NHL dot. selling us this astronomical rate of shots for and against, which we don't want. There's a couple of ways that we can tell Tableau what we want it to do next. And since we want to create something interactive and something visually pleasing, there's a couple of ways that we're going to go this time that we wouldn't have to do necessarily. We want to know by team. We want to know which teams are doing well and which teams are doing poorly. So that's a dimension. It's text. So you can click on that. And I'll just show you a couple of other ways that this could be first. If you drag it to color, it'll ask you, is this what you meant to do? And again, Tableau is almost, it's built perfectly for me and maybe not for you because it's kind of built for dummies where it asks you all the time, is this what you meant to do? Which is great for me. And so it's saying, do you want to add all 31 members? 31 members is 31 teams, so you know, yeah, this is what I was trying to get at. And so you can click add. Okay, so it's a good first step. Now we got the teams broken up, so we can see kind of what you would expect to see. Tableau's randomly selected some colors for us. Some of them actually work, which is nice. But this isn't where we want to finish. It's just steps along the way.
Sorry, where did you drop that?
So team from the dimensions,
Yes.
drag it onto color just to see,
Oh, I see.
add all members, and then it breaks them all apart. This would work the same if you had a list of players instead of teams, drag the players to the colors, and it would try to give 700 players their own color too, which is also very fun to watch. And it will ask you, are you sure you meant to do that? Which is also the dummy proof. Okay, so we don't actually want to do colors. You could also drag to labels, and it would do this ugly bit of business, but we don't want that either. Instead, what we want to try to do to make this as visually pleasing as possible for this experiment anyways is drag it to shape. Now again, Tableau wants to help you as much as it can. It chooses some random shapes. Minnesota Wild has an asterisk. Los Angeles Kings is an X, which probably makes sense this year. But these are the shapes we want. We want something, again, that's visually pleasing. And so we're going to change these shapes. So I'll get you to go over to the right side pane where the list of teams is, and there's a little drop-down carrot. There's lots of different things we could do in here, and we're not going to worry too much about most of them. We're just going to go to edit shape for now. So again, Tableau is just beautiful because so many options are built right in. With the shapes, we want to choose something else for each of these data points. And so I have a variety in here because of other things I've played around with. I'm going to choose color logos, but you're likely not seeing that yet. So let me show you how to do that. So one of the things that was emailed to you was a zipped file of logos. Does that ring a bell in the email from Michael? So that file of logos, we need to move it to a place where Tableau is looking for it. So I'm just going to go through right now and show you where to drag it. If you go to your documents, if you go to your documents, you'll see something called My Tableau Repository. Tableau put that there for you when you downloaded and installed the program, so that's already there somewhere. So I double-clicked on My Tableau Repository. That's where Tableau can store extra things that you might need along the way. There's a folder inside that called Shapes. So I'll double-click inside Shapes. Now you likely have nothing in here, or maybe just a few of the, I'm trying to see if there's a default file that might be in there, probably empty. So this is where we want to put the NHL logos that you would have downloaded. You need to unzip that file into here. So if you have it like I do here, you can extract it. And I promise this is the in the weeds part. We'll get moving again quickly. So we'll extract those shapes. you'll get something called color logos. And that needs to be in your shape. So I'm not going to do it, I already have it. But you're just making sure that it gets dragged into my Tableau repository into shapes. Is anybody stuck on that part? Okay, so if we need to circle back, I will. Otherwise, want your shapes in here.
Theoretically, you could do the same thing with player headshot.
Player headshots. I've messed around with this. It's horrifying on a scatter plot. Many, many other things. Will be unimaginative for tonight. Okay, so if you were successful following all that, we'll go back here. We'll go to the caret on the right with teams. We'll go to edit shape. Many of these come with Tableau. There's default, filled. Actually, maybe that's it. So default and filled, there's a couple of shape options. We're going to choose the color logos. If you don't see that right now, then just click on Reload Shapes right here. It might not know that you've done it yet. If you click on Reload Shapes, and choose the drop-down, you should see your color logos folder. Then choose there. So one thing that some sites do is when they load the teams in, they go by the abbreviation, like ANA instead of Anaheim Ducks, ARI instead of Arizona Coyotes. That's lovely because the logo file is arranged alphabetically like that. But that's not how the teams are actually alphabetized. If you've ever noticed this, this is something that causes me a heart attack once in a while. So if we assign it right now, we would get the Washington Capitals logo assigned to the Winnipeg Jets, and then everything you do would be flipped, and then you will have a lot of people yelling at you on Twitter, which I have done. So the quick way is we have 31 logos here. We have 31 teams. So click Assign Palette, and it's going to take those logos and in order apply them to each of those teams. But because we're using natural stat trick and Brad writes out the full name, we just have to go through and verify to make sure we've lined the right logo up with the right team before we go further. And there's a couple of spots where that gets messy. So Calgary's got Carolina. Again, not a switch they would want. Carolina has the Columbus. So to switch those, just click on the team, go over to the logos and click the logo. And you're just manually assigning. So there's 4 in the letter, 5 in the letter C. Switch. Nashville gets messed up. So Nashville switches to Nashville, New Jersey switches to New Jersey. And everything else should be good except for that Washington Winnipeg. So there's a few switches to make. If you're a patron at Evolving Wild and you download data there, they're alphabetized by the 3-letter abbreviation, and so it just lines up immediately, but it just takes a second to verify. Okay, so once we're happy, we've got all our logos assigned, we click Apply. And then OK. So it's not the fun world of 700 headshots, but we do have the logos instead of the data points, which is nice, it looks better. But it's still weird because our axes have too much space and our shapes are too small, and there's a few other things we want to change. So I'm going to run through this. This wouldn't be the same for anything you would ever want to do, but for our purposes, there's a few things we need to do. One thing is these logos are just too small. So if you take a look in the middle, we dragged team to shape earlier. There's a few other things that we can do in here. One of them is size. So just click on size. And it's a slider, super easy. If you want, you could make them astronomically small. You can make them so large that they're indecipherable. And again, Tableau is kind of built for a dummy like me, so there's a default setting right in the middle. It's okay, I usually like to go a little bit bigger, but that's just case. So I'm just going to resize so we have a good size. Okay, so our second issue is our axes. And if you do follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen me complain about the New York Rangers this year. And there's a reason why I complain about the Rangers all the time. For one thing, I feel for them because they're having such an atrociously bad outlier of a season. If you're a Rangers fan, I'm with you in spirit. I'm very sorry. And so the issue is Tableau will set the axis ranges automatically. And it stays on something called automatic. And so if you right click on either axis, doesn't matter, there's an edit axis button. You can basically right click anywhere in Tableau and it gives you options. If you right click there, it's set to automatic. So if you're someone like me who uploads data every day to make new charts and you want it to just kind of repopulate and be quick, it's really great to leave it as automatic because if a team moves outside of the range, then Tableau will just update the ranges for you. That's great. But one issue with the shot rates, in particular with Tableau, is that it goes automatic like this, leaving all that white space that I don't want. So I have to go with a fixed axis range, and you're going to have to as well. And so now you're in that game of guessing, how bad can the Rangers be? Because you're going to set the axis range. And then every morning I check to see if they've snuck out, and they do. So we're just going to do a little bit of eyeball test here. Dirty word in analytics conference. So we can move this around. If you slide it over to the side, we can get a sense of where we want our range to start. Again, everything in here is editable. And so a nice range for us is probably something like 45. So you can change it, hit enter, it updates. If you don't like it, you can keep tinkering until you get it just right. Understanding, of course, that you're going to need room for the Rangers. Okay, so we're going to come back into this in 1 second, but let's just leave it like that for now. So we've stretched it out nicely horizontally, or vertically. We want to do the same thing horizontally. So we'll go down to that axis, right-click, save process. Edit the axis. And we're just going to eyeball to give ourselves what we want. When I'm setting them myself, when I'm fixing them by hand, I try to do the same range on both sides so that you're not skewing the data. Tableau does this automatically, but again, we're not doing automatic here. So I try to choose the same range on both sides, otherwise you can tell lies with the sides of the axes. So, just gonna double check what I did. 45 and 68. Again, it'll update for you so you can see now we've got some spread. Okay, so far so good. We've got the logos on. They're assigned to the right team. They're a nice size. We've spread the axes out. The axis ranges are even, so we're not skewing things. It's not bad. One thing that we need to switch is something that I give credit to Michael Blake McCurdy all the time for. So I'm always out in social media yelling about fun, bad, good, dull. That's not me, that's Micah. He created that years ago, and I've borrowed that terminology from him because it's succinct and perfect, as Micah is wont to be. Right now, the Rangers, despite the fact that they are generating 49 shots 4 per 60 and giving up 66.5 per 60, which is truly terrible, historically awful, we have them at the top of the chart. And because we're doing a Tableau workshop, this is all about the visuals. And so we want things to look the way that they should look. We want things to communicate a message clearly right away. And when you see something at the top, it suggests that it's good. And we know that this is actually quite the opposite. And so we want to flip this around. So we'll go back to edit our axis, right click, edit axis. And we'll go to scale, which is in the middle. And here we can choose reverse. And that flips it for us. And again, this is hearkening back to Micah, who flips the Y. So now we've got the Rangers down in the bottom, and that just feels right based on how they've been playing.
flipping both X's or just one?
Just going to reverse the 1. But again, this is just, it's not right or wrong, but.
Surprise.
Okay, so far so good. One thing you might have noticed as you were playing around, if you've never used Tableau before, one of the most beautiful parts about it is that it's interactive, in that you can hover and interact with the data points as you go. And so anything you have loaded in already is now here if you hover over the data points. We get Buffalo Sabres, you can see the data that's there. You can load as much into that hover view as you want, which is really, really neat. So I'll just sidetrack for one split second to show you that. Let's say for some reason, games played is something that you would want to be included on that hover. If that's something you would want, you can drag it from our measures on the left and drag it to tooltip, the little text box sort of thing in the middle. And now we can see, we verify that it's there. Now when you hover, games played is included in the hover view, which is nice. You can customize this to look how you want. So you can drop lots and lots of hidden information in there if you don't want your view to be too busy, but you want it to be available for a user as they scroll through. You can load stuff in. Okay, last point on the sidetrack, then I'll keep moving. You can also click on tooltip, just a single click, and it brings it up, and then it's editable within here as well. So, right now we have Corsi for below Corsi against, and it just feels kind of wrong. So I've just flipped them. And you don't need to, and if you never go in there, it won't hurt you, but we just reorganize them. You can type any text in there that you want. You can drag any measure in there that you want. Okay, so let's keep moving. So without reference points, something like this data still isn't super handy. We can kind of see which teams are good, which teams are bad, but the average lines, standard deviation, some of those things are really great for giving us some context on what we're seeing with the teams. So we're going to add average lines and we'll add standard deviation to it as well, so we can get a sense of how teams compare to the league on average. So go back to your horizontal axis, your X, and at the bottom you'll see add reference line. Let's get a click there. Then we get a number of options in Tableau. All sorts of things that are just a click that you need to do to add them in. So we can add lines, which we're going to do in a second. You can add bands. You can add distribution. That's where standard deviation will come from. You can transform it into a box plot. There's lots of options. So we'll just stay with line. It's automatically set to give us the average of Corsi 4 per 60. And so I'll just get you to click OK. So it adds the average line for you. Anytime you update the data, it moves the line around, which is really handy. You can hover over this as well, and it tells you exactly what the average is. My personal taste with the reference line is that I don't feel as though average needs to be labeled. And if that's the same for you, you can choose none inside the edit reference line. You could ask it to set the value so it'll show the value at all times, or something custom. I'm just going to go to none, but that's just choice. We'll do the same thing on the Y. Right click, edit axis. Sorry, add reference line. And I'm going to choose none, but that's just a choice. You can go however you choose. So now we get that bullseye. We can see how teams compare to average, which can be really handy for yelling about how great or how awful a team is. See just how distant those Rangers are, just how distant those Islanders are. Don't say that on social media either. I promise you don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So just add one more thing to this view before we start moving it into something we can publish. I really like to add the standard deviation lines. So we're going to right click on our x-axis, and we're going to add another reference line. So same thing we just saw a second ago, we're going to go to distribution and set. And for value, it's set at 60 and 80% of average, which isn't really useful for us. So you can click. And choose standard deviation. So you get the preview as you're going, so you can see you're actually doing the thing you need to do. You get standard deviation, highlighting, or shading on the view for us, which is nice. Everything in Tableau is editable, and so if for some reason you're feeling fancy, you can go really dark. I prefer something a little bit lighter. You can choose custom colors. In Tableau, everything is editable, so we're just going to choose a light color. Again, it's defaulting to showing us that it's a standard deviation lines. Usually I feel as though people don't need that indicator, so I'm going to choose none from label. Just your choice. And then we'll do the same thing for our Y. Right click, add reference, distribution, standard deviation. And take off the pesky label. So to make this concrete, we're going through a very specific example. You're creating all the same things, something that already exists out in the world. But the idea is that you could take any data and then do this too, right? You could go to any sport, you could download home runs versus base hits, and you can have that on the axis. You can take the MLB logos and drop those in. The whole process stays exactly the same. We're just sort of exploring one as a way to see how this works. But it's really difficult. I shouldn't say really difficult. You can go into Tableau and you can mess around and you can make mistakes and you can wind your way back out too. It's built as a drag and drop. So once you've got some of these basics, you can go take it for a walk with 700 headshots or whatever it is you want to do. Sorry, my OCD is taking over. There, better. Okay, so this works. This is a good plot. We've been working in sheet 1 at the bottom, which you can click on again, and it can be renamed. We're not going to rename it. Tableau functions by creating sheets that you can edit. And that's not the final product. It's not the thing you would want to publish online or then download the views. It's just where it's your workspace. And so we're going to take what we've created in our sheet and we're going to make a dashboard out of it. And the dashboard is the cleaned up view. Other options are there. That's the thing that you can download and it looks sharper. So we've been working in this sheet. You could create other sheets, new worksheet, if you wanted to do other things in this container. But we don't, we just want to make a dashboard for what we've already created. So right here, you'll see new dashboard, just click on that. And you'll get transported to this second screen that's blank. Okay, so again, there's lots going on and I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to keep myself moving quickly and I hope I don't leave you behind as we go. Any sheet you make gets loaded up in sheets on the side. And so if you had made shot rates, expected goal rates, save percentage versus shooting percentage, all on different sheets, now they're all available. They could all be dragged into this one dashboard. They could all live in the exact same space. We're not doing that, we're just doing one. And so this sheet is right here. We're just going to drag it in. And there it is. Like anything else with Tableau, everything is editable. So we've dragged in this sheet. It lives in the dashboard now. And there's some things that we want to change if we're going to publish this online, something that people are going to see. The names and the logos, not really necessary, right? We've got logos for the data points, and the whole point is that the logo tells you who it is. So we're just gonna get rid of that. So you can click on the team legend and just click the X. Disappears, resizes, really nice and easy. That sidebar can function as a highlighter. See, there's a little pen up here. If you click on the pen and click on a team, it just highlights the one. So again, if any of you follow me on Twitter, if you're doing something like the skater charts and I want to show just that team, highlight them in a sea of 700 skaters, you click the team, and then it's just showing you those logos with the other ones in the background for reference, which I like. But we don't need that in a view like this, so we're just killing it. Okay, so yeah.
Just in this particular example,
Yeah.
you got Philadelphia and Florida basically right on top of each other. What would
Yeah.
you do in this situation?
Right, so this was something I was dealing with this morning when I had some Flyer fans asking me if I kicked them out of the league, which I've tried to in the past. So by the nature of this, there's a couple of things you could do. You could right-click on it in our sheet. I should do this while I'm saying it. You can go back to it in the sheets. Down that. They're hiding. And if we right-click on that logo specifically, we could mark that label, or sorry, we could annotate that label. And it would create a little text box to show where they are. You can move it around. It's not really convenient for this view, which is why I just explained that they're hiding, but you could mark the points with labels like that if you wanted to. I'm just going to imagine that the Flyers don't exist for today. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right there. Okay, so we want to do a couple of things with this before we can publish it. At the top, it says Sheet 1. That was the name of the sheet when we were there. We want to change it, so you can just double-click on it. You can change this to whatever you want to change it to, and I'll leave that up to you. There's a couple other things that we can do. If you look in the bottom left, there are a variety of things you can drag onto your dashboard to make it work in different ways. And so for me, I have to drag a text box to the bottom to type in where I've downloaded my data. You can click and resize and it adds it in. You can edit the text, you can shade that box, you can make the text larger, you can center that text, et cetera, et cetera.
Where'd you get that box, sorry?
So on the left in the objects, there's a text box right here. I just dragged it onto the bottom. You'll notice it's set as tiled right now, which means when I dropped it on, it resized everything around it to make it fit. You can also choose floating. If you choose floating, you can take a text box. So I chose floating, and I'm taking a text box, and now I can drop a label over top without anything else moving. For example. So this can be handy if you want to do some manual labeling of the different quadrants in this case or whatever else. You can take a text box, you can drag it and drop it any place you like. So again, that's just right here, text box. I switched to floating, so it'll float over top. You can drag it any.
And so to align particularly in the portal?
So I use the axis lines and I do it manually because I've done it a billion times and I feel like I can hide up, but you can go into the layout up here and then it tells you exactly where it's positioned and you can change these numbers and it'll move the objects around. You can also drop images onto here. You can drop buttons. We won't get into those. We'll just keep moving. Okay, so let's,
Should I show that to?
okay, let's just do one last quick thing. There are a variety of ways you can change the dashboard all at once. Say you despise the font we've chosen. If you go to Format at the top and click, you can choose Workbook, and then it gives you the font options on the side. So we've been working in Tableau Book. If you really like something else, you can choose it from here. It'll change it everywhere. Again, just stop. Okay, so let's save it. If you downloaded Tableau, that means you created an account with your email address already. So we're going to save this, and it should be, if this is new to you, your first viz on your public profile. So to do that, go to the hard disk button here to save, and click Save. It'll ask you to name it. And then click Save. You should be seeing this. Look good so far? Okay, so now this is your home online. Because we're using Tableau, the free version, anything that you want to save gets saved to the website. That doesn't mean that it's all public. You can hide it so that people can't see it. And I'll show you that in a second. But because we're using the free version, everything goes public. If you wanted to, there's a few things that we can change. So I'll get you to scroll down. And there's a spot that says Edit Details. Click there. If you wanted to change the name of what you've done, you can edit it. You can add a description. The part we're concerned about is these little check boxes at the bottom. So right here you'll see allow workbook and its data to be downloaded by others. That depends on what you're up to. So if you're creating something for a hockey team and it's going to be hidden and you really would not like somebody to be able to download it, you can click on this to uncheck it. Now someone can come and view the viz, but they won't have the ability to download the data from it. So I set like that just by default.
But they can download the image still, right?
They can still download the image, but not the data that's behind it directly. This part is important if you've got many sheets and then many dashboards all in the same viz. We could have created something for shots, expected goals, shooting percentage, and many dashboards all in that one viz we were working on. If you have multiple sheets and then multiple dashboards, the only way to get through them is to make sure that you're showing your workbook sheets as tabs. If you uncheck that, it's only going to show the view that we saved. And anything else that lives in that viz will be hidden. So it's just a way to customize. This is pretty good. So I'll save. And then I'll get you to go to your profile. There's one more thing worth taking a peek at here. So you have a little icon in the top right. Go to my profile. And then you'll see whatever vizzes you've created. Maybe it's just the one. In the top right corner, there's an eyeball. That's the hidden or public view. It's that simple. And so if you want the world to be able to see it, you can click on the eyeball. You'll see that the full color shows up. If you click on the line, it's faded out and it disappears. Okay, I think that's good. The the last thing to note while we're here in the public part, there's a couple of things you can do. If you head down to the bottom right, this is the download button. Because I blocked the data part, you can't download the data on this one. That's just a choice that you can make. You can download just the image, it goes into your downloads, or you can download the entire workbook. And so for what I do daily, I download a workbook, update the data, save it back over top of the file that was already there, so that it keeps taking up the same space but not growing day by day by day. So if you wanted to go back into this tomorrow and update the data, you could download your workbook, go back in, and mess around. You'll have the same thing, save it back to the same file. If you don't do that, you'll learn the lesson that I learned in my first couple of years working with it. You'll wind up with several hundred or 1,000 vises. Many of these should live in the same viz. There's probably 800 that could be deleted. Tableau's asked me about deleting some of those. But you have very, very large public saving space, so we're okay. All right, so I'm just going to close this
Are you still using the free version or?
right now. Yeah. It's very expensive.
And they eliminated the personal license option, right, so you still get $150, now it's like $1,000
Right.
or something.
Gordon.
So do you use the, we ask questions?
Yeah, sure. Is there,
I'll wait till the end.
I think like I'm very close here. Let me see if there's anything else I want to know. I think we're pretty good. So this is a basic scatter plot. There's lots of other things we could have done, bar charts, all sorts of the charts in the show me. It's really quick. We're going through in an hour how to go from ground up on this, but hopefully you're able to follow along. You've got your first viz. Maybe it makes sense, Michael. I don't know how you feel about it, but if there's a little bit of extra time in questions for how to, like if I stop now instead of going on further, is that okay to you?
Yeah, you're the boss, so
Lovely.
you've got about, say about 6-7 minutes, and then time for questions.
Sure, okay. So maybe I'll turn it over now instead of dictating any other things. We've built our basic scatter plot. Everything in this is editable. Everything in here could be changed. And so a lot of it is just personal taste, how you want it to appear for yourself, depending on what your purpose is. But I'll turn it over to questions now. If there's something you're wondering about, something I went too quick over, anything you want to ask, I'll put that up to you now. And so maybe it makes sense to.
Sure. Kind of a technical question about the data. So when you update your data, do you use the refresh thing, or like you were mentioning you?
Okay, so that's a good question. So to update data, I would download the new data, and then just as if I was creating the viz all over again, go to new data source, go back to text file, and the new data that I just downloaded that day would be here. Populate here to make sure that I have exactly what I'm looking for. Go back to that sheet. Now it's got two data files living in here. You can actually work off both of them at once. So you can draw, if you click on the one that we have, I can draw measures and dimensions out of one. Then I can click on the second data and I can drag measures and dimensions out of that one, and Tableau will pull from both data spots at once. If I'm just updating something, I right click and I replace. It tells me what I currently have, shows me my replacement, click OK, and then it will update. That one's broken because I didn't actually update with new data, but you can replace it right in there. Then everything stays the same. That's where the New York Rangers kill me, because if they've had, say, a 9-3 loss, they may have slid. Because my axis ranges are fixed, I have to make sure they didn't disappear. And so you just have a manual process of making sure a team hasn't tried to relegate itself, but you can replace the data here. Yeah, anything?
couple questions. First, can you sort of turn the history of visas into an animation?
Yes, but it sucks. So, like something over time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you see like
Yeah.
gliding.
Yes, so Tableau has a function for it. You may have noticed it says pages up here, right in between our columns and rows and our data. If you have data that's over time, something that has a date range in it, you can drag that date range into pages. Tableau will put a little play button and a couple little details you can edit at the bottom, and you can click play, and it will move through the date range the way you've asked it to and show you over time. But you can't save that up onto the website. It won't play from there. It will only play in your sheet. And so because of that limit, I don't ever use it. But you can do it within, it just doesn't work for publicizing stuff.
Another question is, can you script this? Can you just sort of prepare some kind of file with definitions, feed it, and get the workbook, or even maybe upload into the public the result? And you need the human factor from in between.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, which I haven't, but you could. And somebody with your sort of experience with what you do, you definitely. Yeah, I just haven't. Yeah. Anything else? Please.
Yeah, you mentioned that you could, make one of these things like hidden. Is it possible, to hide it from the public or share it with like specific people that might want to see it?
Yeah, so, is this one still up here? I'll just save it. Okay, so we saved it already, so you'll have it there. If we'd uploaded the data, it would ask us to overwrite, which we will. And so we have this one set to hidden, so only you can see it as long as you're logged in as you. If you accidentally log out, you won't be able to see your own viz if you go to that page. The link will still work though, so if you have a hidden viz that can't be seen by scrolling through your public page, but you send someone this web link, they'll be able to click on it and go into it. So it can be hidden, but it can still be shared with somebody you trust not to share the link where it should be shared. Yeah. Anything else that was too quick with, or something else you're wondering about? Beautiful thing about it is that it's really user-friendly. So once you dive into it, you can drag and drop and make lots of strange mistakes and create like catastrophes and see what went wrong, but it lends itself to playing around with and learning as you go. There is an online community for Tableau. I guess I should mention, if you have questions about how to create something, I find the community hit or miss with what it can actually help sort out for you. So finding other people who create vizzes and asking them directly is generally better than a forum question. There's some viz types that are really tricky to create. Ryan Stimson, who will be keynote speaking tomorrow, he did a lot of the work on the passing data for years with Corey Schneider, working together on that, trying to get directionality, pass location to pass location. You have to use some workarounds for Tableau. There are lots of ways to workarounds in Tableau, but it does take some steps, and sometimes the forum doesn't have all those answers. So finding somebody that you trust that you can ask these questions that uses Tableau is the best way. Yeah.
Do you learn a lot by looking at other people's spreadsheets?
Yeah, especially at first. So I think Dominic Galamini will be in attendance tomorrow. I think he's coming. So Dom was the original creator of the hero charts, and Dom was making them in Tableau, and that was a lot of inspiration at first for me, how to use it. But other sports are really interesting too. Soccer's got lots of interesting stuff going on, especially because of their expected goals data and how they visualize and their passing, and some things we don't have as easily in hockey. So yeah, for sure. Anything else? Great. Well, if you have any other questions, I guess I should have actually used my speaking notes to some extent. Did I have anything really interesting here? Maybe I didn't. I might have stopped.
I have a question now.
Oh, yeah. That would have been good enough. Yeah.
What is this? How did you make these slides? What is this program?
Oh, this is Prezi.
Okay.
Prezi.com.
Thank you.
My former life was as a teacher, and so to keep kids interested in something I was talking about, it was helpful to have animated slides. I think I got through. Yeah, so I guess the only other thing I would say is you can find me on Twitter at Tierney Hockey. And again, I try to be accessible if this is something that you're looking at using for yourself in the future and you get stuck somewhere. Reach out and I can point you in the right direction. You can really, it's sort of a sandbox in that you can kind of play around and figure things out too, but use me as a resource if this is the direction you decide to go in, and I'm happy to help you. Okay, thanks.